Hello, welcome everybody to Red Connections episode... which episode is this?
6?
It's 8. This is episode 8.
8.
Well, 9
previous episodes?
Yes, we did. 9 if you count the lost episode you did with Austin.
Yeah, that one is probably never coming out, because I actually cannot export those files anymore.
Oof. So yeah.
Gone forever.
And also you guys apparently got a lot wrong on that one, so probably for the best.
Here's the thing is that we got everything right, except our timeline was way off. We were like, the American descent into fascism won't happen for like another 10 or 15 years. And oh buddy, it all happened that week.
Oh, Christ. All right, well, we're not here to talk about how the horrible present. We are here to talk about the horrible past.
Horrible past.
Very specifically, this one thing I had a hyperfixation on like a month ago, which is the Alexandrian conquests. So, how do you want to start this off?
I was going to let you like walk us through it a little bit.
Okay, yeah, because if I start,
I'll lead us off on tangents.
Okay, yeah, I'll get started on tangents. It's just, so, I guess I'll ask you, Greg, what do you know about Alexander the Great, other than the fact that he was gay?
You fucking guy, you took the words right out of my mouth. No, I mean, he's kind of the model general, especially in classical history.
Unprecedented until Napoleon. And even then, I think...
Yeah, I would say it's unprecedented. Genghis Khan or...
Yeah, Khan's... The Great Khan is probably a more accurate
we're not
analogy.
Giving the Chinese enough credit. There are some great generals in there, obviously.
Qin Shi Huang?
Qin Shi Huang was before Alexander.
No, he wasn't. He was about 80 years after.
Yep, did that fuck you up? Like how Chinese history is happening at the same time?
Yeah, it is kind of fucked up. Yeah, like
I always kind of like in my mind imagine most of Chinese history happening like before this.
Yeah, no, Alexander died in 330 BC. Qin Shi Huang was emperor from 221 to 210.
Oh yeah, there's a decent amount of time in there.
This is...
He could have taken China.
I don't know, because...
He probably couldn't have. He wouldn't have been able to get there, I don't think.
So, yeah, Alexander, he's one of the probably most interesting figures in history just because of how singular he is, right? Like, one of the main things I'm going to be drawing on here is the Excellent Tides of History kind of miniseries that Patrick Wyman did about the Macedonian conquests, and specifically Philip and Alexander. And one of the things that he really bangs the drum about, in part because it's a weekly show and there needs to be some repetition there, but also is that most people are largely replaceable, right? Mm-hmm. Like, slot in another person of roughly their social position, roughly their educational and professional background, you get basically the same result, right? Like, the specific example he gives is that, like, Columbus was, like, dime a dozen of all the asshole Italians floating around the Western Mediterranean. Right?
Like, there was an off-topic tangent inbound.
He wasn't even very good at it. We didn't name the continent after him.
No, we named it after another.
I'm gonna take a personal moment here to say that my 4th grade U.S. history project was all about Amerigo Vespucci.
Yes, okay? Amerigo Vespucci, yet another asshole Italian floating around the Western Mediterranean.
Italian, but not as much of an asshole as Columbus.
Not a genocidaire.
Yeah, not a genocidaire, just a normal asshole.
Yeah, but he pulls out Alexander, not Napoleon. Alexander as like someone who was very unique. Like only he could have achieved this, right? Like it's like him, Napoleon, Lenin, maybe FDR, right?
Actually, I'm going to give you some props here, Captain Leftcom. I don't think it would. I think Trotsky was a better general.
No, I mean in terms of like his. Oh yeah, Trotsky was absolutely the better general. General. He was a military administrator. Really, I don't think he ever actually took to the field.
What was his title? What was his title in the war?
He was the People's Commissar for Army and the Navy. He was basically the Minister of Defense.
Close enough. You know who else actually? We're going to talk about just like 20th century generals who maybe match up to Alexander, especially in terms of like scope and scale of the operational front, would be, I have a few candidates here, and some of them are not good guys, okay, but some of them are.
Well, my category is not singular generalship; it is singular
Well, I guess,
historical figure, right? Like somebody that is
yeah,
not
yeah.
that is not replacement grade, right? Like
Well, then I would say
Lenin,
like Churchill.
Churchill was replacement grade, I'd say.
I don't think so. I think he was singular and unique only in the position that he was really the only high-ranking person in like British leadership that was not willing to turn tail and work with the Nazis.
What about Clement Attlee?
Well, Clement Attlee, well, Clement Attlee, but it's not the same amount of like leading through war experience. I think maybe if he was under similar pressure, probably.
I mean,
but I don't
that's
think
what
he's a good comparison. I think like
that's what
Churchill's
happens.
singularly important.
Yeah, that's what happens in Reds, right? Is Clement Attlee ends up being the PM during World War II, but
FDR.
FDR, yes, I mentioned FDR, singular figure.
Yeah.
Basically, the American. I have opinions about FDR that we can save for another episode.
Well, I kind of want to hear.
I kind of think he was the American Mussolini.
I agree. You know what he was? Competent Mussolini.
He was competent global Mussolini, globalist Mussolini, right? He was like if Mussolini wasn't international.
Lib Mussolini.
No, he was like internationalist Mussolini, right? Like, because FDR's project by the time he died was essentially, all right, I'm making a world state, right? Like that is like that was the American project towards the end of World War II. Yeah. And that eventually, after the anti-communism broke out like hives, which I don't know how much that was a breakout, more just a systemic underlying factor, that shifted from. This is something that Origi brings up in The Long 20th Century, is a shift from one worldism to free worldism, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another person who kind of fits this mold.
Genghis Khan,
Here are my
maybe?
contenders. Well, Genghis Khan, but I'm going to say, like, if we're going to talk, just for people that people will know off the top of their heads, like Ho Chi Minh, absolutely this type of figure, obviously.
And also Von Yun Gap.
Yep, Gap, I think. Also, this is going to be my own personal affinity, so maybe not an A-lister in maybe most people's minds, but Sankara and Kwame Nkrumah.
I definitely agree with Kwame Nkrumah. I definitely put him in, like, high B. I don't know enough about Sankara. Sankara I'd say is probably mid to low B.
Also, who was the guy in fucking Ghana?
That was Kwame Nkrumah, I believe.
No. Kwame Nkrumah wasn't Ghana, was he?
Yeah, he was.
No, there's a guy with like a weirdly white guy name.
I know exactly who you mean. That one Air Force lieutenant.
Yeah, dude, and he was so good. I mean, I don't know if he was great, but like he was so good at what he did, and that's got to be Ghana.
Perfect lib left regime.
Well, he was contemporaneous with Sankara. Hold on. This is going to be the hardest Google of all time.
I know exactly who you mean. The military rule from Jerry Rawlings.
Jerry Rawlings.
He ruled from 81 to 93 as a military dictatorship.
Ghana,
Dictator. Right? Yeah, that's in Ghana. Okay, and then he was democratically elected in 92 and just like had another 4 years another 8 years as president. He had the
fucking mandate of heaven in Ghana.
Exactly, like.
And he's also the only Ghana in terms of like we're going to talk like West Africa. Not in a mean way, but West Africa's a mess. Okay, like Ghana's one of the few countries in West Africa that sees relative stability and has like, especially with its close surroundings, like did actually like develop itself, like industrialize itself.
Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are the two main developmental centers.
Cote d'Ivoire, my personal ideological enemy for life.
Well, yeah, Cote d'Ivoire sucks, but it is also it used those bribes from the French pretty well.
Yeah, to kill Sankara.
Yeah, but they also used them for development in Cote d'Ivoire. Like,
Yeah, they had
bad
you know what they
people
had?
can be good developmentalists.
It's fun, like, because they're doing Leviathan out there. Or maybe not Leviathan. That's not the word I'm looking for. Fuck, what's the other one? They're all contemporaneous with each other. Um,
Leviathan. What the fuck are you trying to say? Are you trying to say, like...
benevolent, the benevolent autocrat. Fuck, who fucking came up with this? You
Oh,
know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly who you mean. I think it is Leviathan. Hobbes.
It's
The Hobbesian
Leviathan.
Leviathan. It's the Hobbesian
Yeah,
Leviathan.
where like sometimes you get like a good one.
It's, I
We're
mean,
just gonna let that hang.
speaking of Hobbesian Leviathans and incompetent developmentalist autocrats, it's time to talk about
Elon Musk. No.
no, it's time to talk about Phil One Eye.
Okay, let's hear it.
So part of the reason why Alexander was able to conquer, the largest empire in human history up to that point with 3 battles over 5 years, which is insane. Partly because populations are much more thinly distributed at this point, and that wars aren't really... Nowadays, with wars, we think of it as, like, lines. Like, there is a line,
Yeah,
and that advances, and there's fighting all along that line. That wasn't a thing until World War One. Armies
yeah.
from the fucking Neolithic until probably at the latest, like World War One, at the earliest, the Napoleonic Wars
The
was
Franco-Prussian War is probably the first.
Franco-Prussian War was armies moving, like armies as like discrete units moving around and like jostling around each other in like squiggly lines, and meeting in single battles, and the entire army is in a battle, right?
Yeah,
Is
and that decides the outcome.
Exactly. And in in like military terms, there's this concept of like the unit of maneuver, right? It's like what unit is maneuvering coherently. Modern times, the smallest unit of maneuver is a division. It's about 10,000 guys, which I think is about the constant size of a unit of maneuver is around 10,000, right? That's like the upper limit.
I think
That
that
is the
they don't go
size.
much bigger.
That is 10,000 guys is like I think the largest Alexander's army gets at any point. Uh,
No, he had a bigger force, especially like in
the
Anatolia. I
Diadochi
thought he had.
the Diadochi had armies of like 50,000, but I think Alexander's army was like 10 to 20,000. Armies are tiny at this point because
Yeah, armies are tiny.
there's less than 100 million people on the planet.
Yeah, but they are the second most densely populated area on Earth at the time.
Well,
Maybe third.
Macedonia is peripheral to one of the most densely
You know what
populated.
I'm saying? Like when he's in Anatolia, though.
Oh no,
That's like a little crescent.
Greece. I'm talking about Greece. Greece is one of the
Oh,
most
yeah,
densely
Greece is
populated
peripheral.
places. No, Greece was legitimately one of the most densely populated places on the planet. It was one of the hotbeds of trade and economic activity. The individual polities were tiny, little, fractious bullshit, but as a region, the Ionian Sea was extremely dense. It was extremely valuable. If we get to the Diadochi Wars, which I doubt we will, this is a big subject. But there was a reason why every single war was ultimately fought over. Okay, who controls the Ionian region, which
Yeah,
basically means mainland Greece and also the fringe of Anatolia,
Peloponnese.
the Peloponnese. Yeah. So basically, Macedonia before Philip, Philip the Second, or Philip the One-Eyed, or as I call him, One Eye Phil. Um, I love doing that with like
That's okay.
epithets.
It's a good
Is
bit.
just modernizing it a bit, but like it was so the Greek world. It can be kind of divided into 2 segments, right? There's the area around the Ionian Sea, right, which is only really the southern fringe of what is now Greece, of what is now the nation of Greece, or the Hellenic Republic, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. That is
Yeah.
such bullshit LARPing, by the way, that they call themselves
Hey,
the Hellenic Republic.
hey, they're not. What are they not? What are the Greeks not, John?
Turks?
It's not what I'm going for, but close enough.
Romans?
People.
Well, they are. I mean, they are
They're
objectively
Turks.
people.
They're Turks without pheasants.
Well, they're Christian Orthodox. They're Orthodox Turks. Like,
There's
I think this is something that's important to remember is that there is basically barely any continuity between these Greeks and modern Greeks other than language.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Other than geographical proximity, I would say like there's probably people who live in central Anatolia are probably more genetically tied to those original Greeks
Well, actually,
than
they're probably closer to like the Gauls that settled there during the Diadochi Wars because.
yeah, yeah. Greece
But
is so fun, like not relevant. They've been ever since Alexander died. Greece has been in debt.
wrong, Byzantium.
They were just kind of a shitty, like not shitty, but they were just like a province of Rome. After that,
They were the central core of what was left of the Roman Empire. Like
yeah,
the
but
East,
they were just, and they were fully extracted.
well, it was also the developmental core of the Roman Empire because compared to the West, even Greece, Anatolia, the riverine areas in Mesopotamia and Syria, vastly more urbanized than the West was. The West was really this is like a take that I have. The Western Roman Empire was fundamentally an attempt to project the urban uh, network of the Mediterranean fringe into the European interior, and the fall of Rome and the uh, ruralization of that part of Western Europe was fundamentally the collapse of that urban network and the collapse of that experiment, right? I mean,
Well,
that's
yeah, no, I
why,
would fully agree.
like the
So,
fall
do
of
you
Rome.
include the Italian peninsula in that urban core, at least by
Yes, I
the
do.
time of Rome's fall?
Yes, I do, because at least southern Italy was the one in terms of urbanization that bounced back the quickest because
Uh, But I would say they probably bounced back the quickest. I'm just gonna say it's
they still
probably due to the influence
collapsed.
of the church, but probably due to the influence of the church is why they bounced
Well,
back.
also it was the most densely populated, one of the most densely populated parts of the Mediterranean. It was
Hmm.
the most had some of the most infrastructure in the Mediterranean. Like
You know what's cool is they
it,
bounced back from that, and then they didn't build anything new until 1930.
I mean they
The
built.
poorest, most underdeveloped part of Italy by the time of unification.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is that Italy was the center of proto-capitalism until around the 1500s. Like, I
Can
think
I?
that's when they stopped building shit, was around 1600.
I'm gonna share a fun fact I learned about my family this week. So, for those of you who don't know, I am part Italian, right? Every white guy.
How the
But
fuck do people not know that already?
I'm just gonna establish this. So I am aware of my family lineage in Italy to a point. I mean, to a very specific end is what I know of my lineage. So my family is descended, not descended. They are a direct line of the Caracciolo house, a noble house in Italy. That they're in a book. There's a book in Naples you can go through to see like the royal lineages. It's in Rome. All right. Anyway, the point is that there are some very important historical figures throughout not only Italian but Catholic history that I am directly descended from. It can get traced back to a certain point, and then it kind of gets fuzzy because those noble houses, through time, because they weren't as inbred as the fucking Northern Europeans, they branch out, they get really big, and the nobility kind of waters down over time.
I mean, once you get further enough back, like, every white person can claim descent from Charlemagne. It's just who has the
True.
paperwork.
So I have the paperwork, and so this house was founded in like probably the 9th century, or at least that's where the first official this is their name shows up. Prior to that, it can be traced back to the Roman Senate as like not more like this family name. The Caracciolo house was bastardized. That name is bastardized from a Latin name. Um, Based in Naples, they were never kings. They were more like secret vizier chat. Um, but some important historical figures. One, there's a pope. I am descended from a pope. Probably an uncle, I would assume. But, like, there's a pope.
I don't
There
know.
is
A lot of popes
also,
had bastards. I mean,
there's also, well,
I don't
yeah.
think papal celibacy was really lock and key until like the 1700s, at least until the
Yeah,
Counter Reformation.
clergy celibacy wasn't a thing until much later. Like, not
At
until the
least locked
14th
down.
century.
It
Yeah,
was. I think it was definitely officially a thing as early as like as early as 1000, but like it wasn't
yeah,
really
but not.
locked down until the Counter Reformation.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Pope, fine. Just definitely. Also, are you aware of the Knights Hospitaller?
Oh, the fucking monk pirates.
The monk pirates of Malta.
I fucking love the Knights Hospitaller because they were just like
Monk
they
pirates.
they were monk pirates. They were monk
So
knight pirates.
the Grand Knight, like the, it sounds like the fucking clan. So I'm really sorry about this, but he was the Grand Knight of the Knights Hospitaller, in the 14th century. Also,
I mean,
relative of mine, helped, God, whatever fucking crusade we were on by that point. But we do know for fact participated in at least one battle in the Levant. So like this was a guy who actually did some shit. He wasn't just like a monk on an island. He was doing stuff. But now we get to the important parts. So there is an admiral. His name was Francesco Caracciolo. You may know him. Actually, you probably don't. But if you ever been like me and you've played a lot of strategy games, you'll know him because his name is tied to a few Italian battleships from the late 19th and early 20th century. He lived in the 17th. He was active in the 1770s. And do you want to know what he was doing between 1776 and 1789, John?
well, it's all Italian military men were just mercenaries, so I could pick any belligerent in the American Revolutionary War,
In,
and I could have a decent chance of getting it right. So I'm just gonna let you
in
tell me.
an official capacity for the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, he used the Two Sicilian Fleet. What a fucking stupid name for a country. But he used that navy to sail for the British under a letter of marque and helped participated in the blockade of colonial ports. And then his story gets better. So once that war was over, he continued to use the Italian navy, were the biggest of the Italian navies at the time. This is Sicily's backwards broken country, everybody. Was the largest land power on the peninsula, though, for quite a long time.
One of the richest
And
parts
largest
of
sea power.
Italy until I want to say until the
Until
the Eurasian commercial expansion started to peter out, and you start having
yeah,
people realize, oh shit, we can just like spend money to make money, and
yeah,
and that's how you get capitalism, and we have a bunch of fucking Italians to blame for all this shit.
yeah. So continued to sail for the British, fought the French a bunch. Then Napoleon came, conquered Italy, was made the admiral of the new Neapolitan Republic's navy, and then was consequently captured by the British and beheaded by the British against the wishes of Horatio Nelson's guests. Okay? So Nelson captured him, had him on his ship. I believe it was one of the other ships. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Too loud?
I was too loud, yeah. One of the other captain's wives personally interceded and said, don't kill him. You don't need to kill him. Ransom him back to the French. Nelson said, oh, no. We're going to cut his fucking head off. So they cut his head off, and they throw his body off the ship, and he just washes up in Naples. And that's the story of Francesco Caracciolo. The Italian Navy named a couple battleships after him. They saw action in World War I and action in World War II. Francesco Caracciolo was sunk, I believe, at Toronto.
Good.
Yeah.
They deserved it.
They did deserve it.
I will
So there
say,
you go. There's my little side tangent.
I think Nelson is very interesting as a historical figure, but I do think he was replacement tier.
Oh yeah, he was a bastard.
He was a bastard, and he's very
I'll never
funny.
forgive him.
Like, you know what his last words were?
I don't actually know. What were they?
Kiss me, Hardy.
I hate him. I hate him so fucking much. Also,
Yeah.
I hate him on a personal level because I really do think it would be way cooler to have seen Spanish England.
Oh, that wasn't his thing. That was
I know,
200
but
years
he was
before
there.
his time.
He's part of it.
He was there spiritually, like
He was.
paracasually.
Hmm. Fuck you,
Like
Nelson.
he spirit traveled.
You killed my great times 10 uncle, you bastard.
Yeah.
Um.
Anyways, back to post-classical Greece.
Oh, can I also say something about post-classical Greece?
Yes.
So I have a map pulled up here, obviously, of Alexander's
Of course.
empire. I want to say he did conquer parts of China,
Well,
modern day China.
Uzbekistan and
No,
Afghanistan. I don't think he
he got
made it that
almost
far.
he got into the parts of the Himalayas that and the Tian Shan that are modern day China. So technically, he did touch China, at least according to this Wikipedia map.
Is it's well, the thing is that his control over the upper satrapies was kind of loose. He's
Oh,
most of the
limited
time
at best.
I mean, he only really controlled. We're getting into the weeds, but so basically, there's two geographical zones in Greece, right? There's the area around I was saying the Ionian. I was partially incorrect. The Aegean Sea. The Ionian Sea is the bit between Italy and Greece. The I'm when I said Ionian earlier, replace that with Aegean because there's the Aegean fringe, which is over because of a variety of reasons. I don't. I also read Perry Anderson's. Edit this bit out, Greg.
Are you getting it?
Yeah, Perry Anderson's Passages from Antiquity to Feudalism. Highly recommend reading this shit. It's like can you hear the music from Oppenheimer playing as you like, oh shit, that's why this happened, right? It's like highly recommend. But basically what happened is I think it was partly because of this area was more agriculturally productive and also it had much easier trade routes because it had sea access in the north and the interior did not. These areas have an enormous population boom. Like literally, like this is after the Bronze Age collapse and like into the Archaic Age, and so this area is kind of arranged into like a series of like tribal monarchies, right? Like
Yeah.
what you see later on with like the Celts and the Germans. And that's like kind of the social formation you see in the Odyssey, or at least a version of that in the Odyssey,
Yeah,
like a half
I think
remembered
it's like
version.
it's most analogous probably to like Ireland.
Yeah, Ireland, exactly. Yeah,
Like there's high kings, there's like lordships. It's
there's
very loose and kind of.
super complicated nesting relationships of like
Mhm.
fealty and guest right and all this shit. It's
When
very
did the
similar to
I mean, is there a concept at this time of Greece?
kind of sorta. Um,
Because I know
so
that there was a common thread, especially amongst Philip's conquests, that the Macedonians were not Greek.
yes,
They are
basically
outsiders.
there's an identity that forms as in part because of shared linguistic traits, as well as various political economic developments that I will get to. So there's this enormous population boom in the in the post Bronze Age era, right? Like this, what's called Archaic Greece, right, where this like literally unprecedented until the Industrial Revolution. Like the
Hmm.
population, like the current archaeological estimates is that the population doubles or triples over the course of 150 years. You froze for me.
You froze for me.
Uh-oh.
Keep talking. I can hear you. You hear me? "29 minutes."
Oh, are we back?
Go ahead. Keep going. I marked it in the recording.
Okay, good. Uh, like yeah, population doubles or triples over the course of like 150 years, right? And as that happens, the system of like small agricultural villages and sanctuaries, like religious centers, start to congeal into what they consider cities, right? Like these basically population centers where you have your landowners and your farmers live in, and then they during the day they go out and farm the land. And there's satellite settlements for like the further bits of the region under this city. And there's this whole process that happens where you have the tribal kingships eventually get overthrown by their subordinate aristocracies. Class struggle shit happens, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
Marxism, it's a science.
It's always happening.
God damn it.
You were getting somewhere with this.
Yeah, no, okay, your video is frozen, but I'm still getting audio. Oh, and
Yeah,
you're back.
you're
Okay.
fine. Just keep going.
Right when I get into a fucking flow state. Okay. So, yeah, class struggle shit happens for a variety of reasons. If I remember right from Anderson, it's basically increasing agricultural productivity increases the strength of the aristocracy relative to the tribal kingships, which leads to the tribal kingships trying to stomp the aristocracy and getting knocked down. And so you get these aristocratic states that eventually that harden between you have the aristocrats and you have like the farmers and like the petty landowners, and eventually things get so out of balance, right, that the through these essentially dictatorships with mass support, which are the tyrannies. Tyrant and tyrannos in the Greek just means absolute ruler, somebody who has unchecked rule. It does not mean king. It just means a dictator, essentially. In the modern English colloquial word. You get these tyrants that facilitate essentially these uprisings and revolutions that eventually, after about a generation or two, lose their grip on power, and you get this. And after they basically flatten the class structure of these city states, which they are now these poleis,
Yeah.
which are micro little. They're called city states, but they're more like micro states. It's like you have a primate city that is houses most of the population, controlling a swath of land, of farmland, and as well as a couple satellite settlements. And in total, this area it's usually just like a valley, right? Like commonly said
Yeah,
thing is that Attica, which was the polis of Athens, could have been traversed in a bicycle ride, in an afternoon's bicycle ride.
Yeah,
These are
this is
tiny
like
states.
dozens of miles across, dozens of miles long. Maybe they're 100 square miles.
These are yeah, and not all of them are I said primate cities. Some of them are more like collections of villages that have like a common center where they meet and discuss. Some of these are proper city states. Some of these are like pocket empires, like
Sparta.
like Laconia, like Sparta.
Yeah.
But all of them have that is the in each of these I want to say they're tiny geographically, and there are hundreds of them, and each of them have populations that by the time of Philip have populations in the tens of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And this like the combination of and in addition, these are slave societies, right? Like
Yes, they are.
there are two classes in this. There are the slaves and there are the citizens, and like to the point where freedom is in the Greek city states is often considered to be freedom from labor, right? Like you have you have an estate, you have a bunch of slaves that you control running shit on your property out in the countryside, or like running a mine or working in a manufactory, and that is your passive income, and that is what allows you to be a free, politically engaged citizen.
There's a reason the antebellum South is so obsessed with Greece.
And with Rome,
And
Rome
with
was, but like slavery was a condition in the rest of the Mediterranean world and in Europe and really the rest of the planet. Or
slavery is freedom from slavery. The emancipation of the slave classes is kind of unique to the 19th century.
yes, but very specifically, slavery as a totalizing economic condition, slavery as specifically a one of two classes was unique to Greece at this point, and this is why classical Marxist political economic historians talk about the slave mode of production, because the people who are actually doing production at this point, agricultural and whatever little scraps of industrial and craft production are happening, because like a solid 98% of production at this point is agricultural and will be until the 1700s,
Yeah.
are all slaves. All the people doing the actual work are slaves. They are property. They are like, whereas, and there was only slavery and freedom. Whereas over in the East, there was a much more gradation. Like you had,
Yeah, the Greeks kind of invented the concept of what we would consider chattel slavery.
exactly, yeah,
It's chattel slavery, whereas slavery in the East is a lot more akin to like feudal serfdom, where like
yeah,
you
and
are
you also,
not free, but you are not. It's not. There's no good way to say this, but like you're not like being. You're not
you're
having
not
the
a,
shit kicked out of you all the time.
and there's also like fundamentally you are not properly a person under Greek slavery. In the
Yeah.
same, yeah, like this is also the case in but it's more like you're more like it's various degrees of like, okay, you're a prisoner of war, okay, you're in debt, okay, you're
Yeah. Yeah.
so on and so on, right? Whereas yeah,
In
Greece, it
Greece,
is totalizing.
it's cradle to grave chattel slavery. What it is.
Exactly. Or captured a grave.
Yeah.
And it is also
Anyway,
it's but yeah, so this is like the political economic substrate, and all these police after about so and around if I remember right, about 500 BC, you have the Persian. So that is fundamentally the bedrock of Greek identity, is the concept of the podeis, right? It's like you're from one of these states, and that is inalienable. You cannot switch your citizenship. You cannot discard your citizenship. If you discard your citizenship, you are stateless.
yeah.
Like you are permanently a foreigner. It is bone deep, it is blood deep. This is like the main different innovation that the Romans had over this, is that citizenship was it was much more American, or much more, yeah, it
Hmm.
was much more American. You could become a Roman. You could not become you if you were
You cannot
born
become an
what
Athenian.
you
It's
cannot
something
become
you
an
have.
Athenian, you cannot become a
It's
Corinthian,
innate.
you cannot become a Spartan.
Yeah, it's innate. It is what you are, and that's kind of the foundational. Like this is what Greek society looks like when the Persians roll in.
Yes, and that is
Um,
what that is the core of Greek identity. Is that, and also opposition to barbarians and to barbarians, right? Which can mean anybody from up north, like whether they're Thracians or Celts or whatever, or even if they're the obviously much more civilized and humane Persian Empire.
yeah, it's barbarians as a concept, which the Romans will later use. It's just anyone not within the system.
Yeah,
Um, because at this point also like we're gonna when we talk about like the Persians rolling in before we get to Alexander rolling them the fuck back out, is like this Greek concept of a city state, these poleis, in English we just call them polities, what they are.
yeah.
um they're not stuck in the Ionian Peninsula. They're not just there. They are across the Aegean. They are all up and down the west coast of what was modern day Turkey. We get the stories of the Trojan War. These things, these are happening in what we would call Turkey now. It's just at this point in time, before the diffusion of like the Turkic peoples across, and prior to them, the Persians across Anatolia, the Greek identity like exists kind of in this circle that
There are
surrounds Athens, but it's a circle. It goes up. Even the people in Sicily and Syracuse at the time, they're Greek. They think they're Greek. Like
there are
that's their
Greek
idea.
colonies. There are Greek colonies in France and in Crimea at this point.
Hmm.
Part of the population boom meant that there was too many people in Greece to like reach population capacity. So like they just start prior to immediately prior to the classical period was a massive colonization wave, which is where you get Syracuse, it's where you get Marseille, it's where you get modern Sevastopol, it's where you get most of the cities on the Aegean coast of
Where you get
Turkey.
Barcelona,
Barcelona, if actually no,
something over there. Not
Cadiz
Madrid.
was Cadiz
could
was
be-
Cadiz was Phoenician. Most of the Western Mediterranean, except for Marseille, was Venetian. At least on
Well,
the
they get
coastal
a series
colonies.
of cities on the Italian peninsula as well. So, like at this
Yes,
point, the Latin
in
tribes are tribes, and so they can't meaningfully resist like a relatively well organized. Also, the hoplite formation, like
yeah, it mogs everything.
The Greek military. The reason they were able to exert the influence they were is because they did kind of have an unbeatable strat at the time,
Well,
which was just make stick extra long, stand in rows, which
yeah,
nobody else had thought of yet.
yeah. Well,
Um,
and it is important to note that Greek colonization was only along the coast. They didn't
there
penetrate
was
at
no
all into the
interiorization.
interior. And yeah, it's like Greek population, and the hoplite, and also, as we will get to, the fact that right after the Peloponnesian War, there was a lot of unemployed guys whose only life skill was killing. So there's this massive mercenary boom right before Philip, One Eye came down from Macedonia. But that, and there's the Persian invasions after this like
Let's get into the Persian invasion.
Honestly, we can kind of skim over it because it's just the
Okay, yeah, I
Persians
mean
come over,
let's
get
do
knocked
like a
back.
5 minute overview of the Persians like showing up and continuously getting their teeth knocked in.
Yeah, the
Um,
Persians show up, get their teeth knocked in, I believe, twice. Three times. Once in the naval battle, and also at this point, Macedonia is either a Persian satrapy or just a run-of-the-mill vassal state.
They're like a Persian client state.
Yeah, they're a client. The historical record is fuzzy on if they were a client state or fully a satrapy. Um,
Fair
uh,
enough.
but at this,
But either way, they
so
exist kind of in the periphery of the Persian Empire, which is
in the borderland between the Persian Empire and the Greek world, because the northern fringe of the Greek world, for a variety of reasons, mostly a lack of population density and just lack of agricultural productivity, if I remember right.
lack of agricultural productivity, and also like Macedon is like I believe for most of its history prior to Philip, they're landlocked. They are not
Uh,
a
yeah,
they're not
yeah,
seafaring.
and also this is the
Um,
Balkans. These are mountain people.
yeah,
But
these are hill people.
yeah, so there's the northern fringe of the Greek world. This is including basically from modern day southern Albania across northern Greece and into by near like Thessaloniki. If you look at the map of Greece, there's like a little three-finger thing point out, and this is all in the interior. The whole tribal kingship thing sticks around. Like they don't develop the police.
Yeah, they
The
don't need to.
population boom uh, leaves them by. But this means that they are, relatively speaking, much more quote unquote primitive in terms of developmental things. Uh, agriculture is almost entirely subsistence. There isn't really any resource extraction, even though these are incredibly rich lands. Macedonia has some of the best timber and silver reserves in the ancient world, and they are not tapped until Philip One Eye gets the ball rolling, because the Macedonian kingship was kind of a fuzzy thing. It was like basically the first among equals in this like tribal aristocracy, and in and essentially what happens is that eventually you get one extremely ambitious and talented guy come to the kingship about 150 years after the Persian invasions, and about 50 years after the Peloponnesian Wars wind down. And do we want to go over the Peloponnesian Wars?
No, I think most people, if they got this far into this podcast, they probably already Googled it. But
Uh,
also, Peloponnesian War, just fucking, you saw the movie with Brad Pitt. That's it. That's
no,
the
that was the
movie.
Trojan War.
Well, that is the Trojan War.
No, the Peloponnesian
They're
War
killing
was
each other. It's the Greek Brothers War.
Uh, basically, this is where if you're like me and you spend some time on international relations Twitter, there's this notion of the Thucydides trap, right? It's where the rising power, Sparta, meets the falling power, Athens, right? Because after the Persian invasions, Athens had basically cobbled together an informal hegemonic empire, which was basically every every place Aegean Sea gave tribute to Athens for the defense of Greek freedoms and like a common navy. And Sparta was like the rising power, and they spent 30 years in essentially on and off warfare that essentially ended with Athens being knocked down by Sparta after the Persians just gave the Spartans like basically an infinite wallet.
Yeah.
Um, and this basically completely devastated and exhausted Greece, right? Like economically, they were. This is 30 years of warfare with population when each state has a population in the tens of thousands. That does not end well, and it doubly doesn't end well when you have a bunch of tens of thousands of like I said earlier, unemployed assholes whose only life skill is to kill, right?
It's
Like
killer.
there's this enormous Greek mercenary boom, like Greek mercenaries see fighting from Carthage to Iraq, what's modern day Iraq, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where you get the March Xenophon and the March of the 10,000, right? It's like the Persian satrap of Ionia or whatever made a gambit to take the become the great king of the Persian Empire, and he lost, and his Greek mercenaries had to make their way home. So this and a bunch of mop up struggles basically locks the various police into this like very fragile like balance and tension where like none of them can overawe the others, and this is where Philip comes in, because Philip is able to take the relative backwardness of Macedonia and play that to his advantage, because it means he is able to leapfrog developmentally.
Mm-hmm.
He basically does a bunch of agricultural programs. He starts actually capitalizing on the resources he has access to, and most importantly,
he's doing ancient era Maoism, just a little bit.
Kind of.
He's developmentally leapfrogging, and he's able to, mainly by the grace of like Macedonia being on this periphery of like the Greek world. Like it's not industrialization per se, but it's like he's able to build state capacity very rapidly, which puts him in an excellent position to essentially overwhelm the other Greek city-states
exactly
with ease, because he's got an army of like soldiers who haven't been starving for 30 years.
Yeah, and also he is able to tie one of the core parts of this project is that the Macedonian aristocracy before Philip was extremely fractious. It was basically in the constant state of low grades of war, trying to eke out a position against each other. And what Philip was able to do was tie the aristocracy directly into the person of the kingship by instituting a bunch of institutional borrowings from the broader Mediterranean world, one of which was these massive drinking parties. Macedonia was a society about the Macedonian aristocracy was a social class that would put the Irish to shame in terms of alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
Like they drink heavily. These are habitual drunks. Alexander is a habitual drunk. And so like these and so you have all these grasping, constantly like trying to like get an advantage over each other. Hangers on. These are the worst people on the planet, by the way. They're constantly knifing each other, trying to get a relative advantage against each other, and they are rapacious. They want more. They want more. They're reaping the benefits of this centralization that Philip's doing, but they want more. And Philip, as part of his expansion, Philip starts running into issues with some of the Greek police. There are right next to him in the Cyclades, which are those like three little pointy bits coming off of northern Greece. There's a bunch of city-states there, and basically Macedonia, there's only one good port that they have access to, and that is God, I forgot the name of it. But there's one good port they have access to, and it is an Athenian client state.
It's Pella, is it not?
No, Pella was the capital, and Pella was not a port. It was near the coast, but it was still landlocked. So, and yeah, part of that centralization is that he builds a capital city, right? Like, he builds a city. Before this, the seat of power of the Macedonian kings was basically a graveyard and with a village attached to it, right?
Yeah.
So they these Macedonian aristocrats are pushing like from below the king to like expand more and do more, and that starts bumping up against the city states, and eventually that means he starts moving south. And a lot of the things that he was able to build up prove to be decisive advantages, right? Like a massive resource base and a massive monetary base, a thinly spread, but still compared to all the police, and a massive population. I think Macedonia at this time had a population of about 50,000. Uh, Thinly spread, but still a much bigger population than the rest of Greece, than all these individual poleis could muster up. Combined, they still would blow Macedonia out of the water. Problem is that these are extremely fractious city-states, and he can just pick them off one at a time, essentially. And this is the number one thing that really gets him going, and that is the phalanx, which is essentially you have a bunch of conscripted. Basically, he does like early conscript warfare where you just say, hey, anybody that wants to, come join the army. We will give you pay, we will give you food. And, you know, Macedonia has experienced a belayed population boom. There's a lot of excess farmers' kids. And so basically, he's able to build a really big army very quickly, partly because most of them aren't wearing metal armor. They're wearing literally linen armor. So they're cheaper to equip at this point. And they also have, they don't have, they're not a shield wall. They're basically they're a pike square, essentially. And they have like a shield. They have a shield that's not really important, and they have a very long pike called a sarissa. And this is essentially the type of weapon that is going to dominate battlefields until Roman hegemony, and then after that it's going to kind of go on the downside, and then after around 1450 is going to dominate again until 1700 and the invention of the bayonet. And these armies are able to just roll the Greeks. After about 10-20 years of incessant warfare down the peninsula, Phil One Eye is able to essentially build a hegemony out of the Greeks and is extracting tribute by the bucket load from these states, right? And starts a cycle. Like something I kind of want to talk about here is in reading about this and like reading about the social formation of the Macedonian military, is this idea of a cycle of professionalization in conscript armies, right? Like you have citizen soldier armies, which then evolve into professional armies, which then evolve into class armies, right? Where you draw armies from the broadest population bases possible. Warfare changes and becomes much more specialized, and so warfare becomes a profession instead of something you do on and off, right? Because here's the thing also is that like these police, every able-bodied male fought at least every other year, because these states were at war constantly with each other.
Yeah. Because
something that Perry Anderson points out in passages is that antiquity is incredibly technologically stagnant compared to the medieval and modern eras and pre-antiquity. There really isn't that much innovation in agricultural production until the medieval era. So that means that that agricultural intensification is not really a thing, which means that the only real route to economic growth at this point is territorial growth.
Yeah, is physical expansion.
It's conquest, which means that essentially, again, this is something that Patrick Wyman really puts really well in some of the episodes he's been doing about the Punic Wars, is that the Mediterranean world at this point, it's all predator states. Their warfare is endemic. It is a nightmare. So that's where you get like the notion of like a citizen soldier, where everybody fights, and then part of the Macedonian is that innovations is that some of the population fights, because this is becoming a very specialized, expensive thing to do. And eventually that develops and ossifies into a military class in the Hellenic empires after Alexander, and then Rome starts to cycle again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Where they're kind of able to just, well, they're creating a class, and then that class always gains consciousness.
Yeah.
It keeps happening.
Yeah,
Keeps happening over time.
it's almost like Marxism is a science.
Like there's a science behind this.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is kind of, by the time, and there's some, I think we should maybe gloss over this so we can get to kind of Alexander's whole bit. But
Yes.
by the time Philip dies, and then, well, there's some trickery. By the time Philip is dead, and now
I want to talk
Alexander
a
is
bit
king.
about how Philip died because I think it is very revealing as to what Macedonian society was like.
Yeah, tell us how. I
So,
know this one.
Philip was killed by one of his bodyguards. The reasoning behind, or like a former bodyguard, one of the companions, like one of these basically Macedonia was being run by a toxic friend group at this
Hmm.
point. Um,
Well, that doesn't stop.
no, it doesn't stop until the 19th century.
Yeah. Mm.
It doesn't stop in some places
Anyway,
until the 19th century, and it's still endemic in large parts of the planet. Um,
hasn't stopped yet. But yeah.
that
So
is what communism is. Communism is the end of toxic friend groups in power.
communism is when your toxic friend group gets to be in power.
That is just what the Stalin clique was by 1953.
Yeah.
Um, but
And Mao by the time he died.
oh god, I don't know if that was even a friend group. I think they all hated each other by then.
That's a
Um,
toxic friend group.
yeah, that's true. Um,
Okay. So yeah. So Philip gets poisoned, and then there's a
no, he
bit of
doesn't get
trickery.
poisoned. He gets stabbed
I
because
thought he got poisoned.
no, Alexander is the guy who they think might have gotten
No,
poisoned.
Alexander might have been poisoned. I thought they did. Oh yeah,
No,
Philip got stabbed. I
yeah,
watched the Netflix show.
yeah. Philip got stabbed because this guy who had been his favorite and his lover. Because here's the thing: we said Alexander was gay. The notions of queerness as we know them don't really apply to
Let's just
Macedonian
gloss.
society.
Let's just blanket statement here. The Greeks they were fucking everybody.
They,
Everybody
they,
was fucking everybody.
yes, and specifically male relationships within the Macedonian aristocracy, totally normal. Was just part of
Yep,
doing business.
completely normal. Yep, that's just
Um,
what they did.
Also, a part of business was sexual assault, and
They
so
did do a lot of raping.
that is what happened to this guy. Philip's new favorite, who was also his son-in-law, or his brother-in-law, I don't remember which one it was.
Brother-in-law.
His new favorite, his brother-in-law, and a bunch of his friends sexually assaulted this guy, and Philip did nothing about it. He or like punished him for it. Like he was shitty, really shitty, and so understandably, this guy kills Philip. Um, uh, and so
And
it's very
yeah,
salacious, but it is, I think, very revealing about how weird and alien this was, because these are violent men, right? These, like Alexander, actually, like to jump ahead, during one of these drinking parties, Alexander during the battle of not I don't know if it was Gaugamela, but it's a battle I think it was at Gaugamela.
might have
Alexander
got Camilla.
almost got killed by Persian cavalry, and he was saved by one of his generals, Black Cletus. Like, he literally owed his life to this guy, right? A couple years down the line, I think it was when they were going to Afghanistan, during a drinking party, Cletus started getting a bit. Alexander started to have a bit of a falling out with some of his generals over stuff like integration of Persians into the Macedonian military. Um, and Black Cletus got drunk, and he started getting belligerent. And he said, "Fuck you, dude. You owe your life to me. You owe your conquest to your army. You didn't do shit. Fuck you." As one does.
Hmm.
And Alexander got so angry he tried to kill him, was held back by the other companions, waited a couple hours. Once everybody started kind of filtering out of the room and going to bed, Alexander left first, grabbed a weapon, and waited for Black Cletus to come out of the room before stabbing him. So, insanely violent belt. These are demons.
Yeah, these are not good people.
No, these like completely alien to us. Like a lot of modern historians think that Alexander was essentially a combat addict.
Yeah, he was probably also a sociopath.
Well, you kind of have to be a sociopath to win so bigly in this type of society.
That's true.
Uh, Also true of this society. What funny how class society works.
Yeah.
Um,
Through a vague amount of trickery, Alexander is now in charge. Okay,
Including killing an
and
infant.
including killing an infant, quite not greatly. Um, I will say, what's quite interesting is that all of this has been preserved.
Yeah, it like because part of the one of the results of Philip's conquest of Greece was that a lot of Greek, to use a modern term, the intelligentsia filtered up to Macedon and
That's
brought a
true,
lot of writing with them.
and they all fucking hated them. So
Yes,
they wrote down all
because
the shitty parts.
exactly, and like gr- Alexander was tutored by Aristotle, or
Yeah,
yeah,
Aristotle. It's Aristotle. Can I just say, I've never really considered this before, and maybe you know the answer. So, we have all these writings. We have all these
yeah,
writings from the Greeks. What the fuck were they written down on? Just on paper?
parchment usually parchment.
Where the fuck were they?
What do you mean? Oh,
Because
what?
we didn't really rediscover a lot of this until like the 19th century. Like really like
Usually
understand it.
in
There's been a cultural
store.
memory, but
Usually there's been source replication through to the medieval period,
mm,
and a lot of source survival is extremely random. I one of part of the research I did for this like a month ago was I listened to an audiobook about the Diadochi Wars, and the source survival is extremely hazy. We have like half of a first-hand source of a lot of the Diadochi Wars because we know these sources existed because they're referred to by like later Greek and Roman and medieval
mhm.
historians, but we don't have any
Just don't
surviving
have any
copies
copies.
of them. So we have like there's this one I think it was like a bishop in Antioch had like cliff notes he had written while reading this book about the Diadochi Wars, and that is the best we have to go on this one specific thing. So like there are battles we don't know the location of that decided like the first Diadochi War. Like we don't know where it was. We just know that it happened. We know the number
It
of
happened.
troops. We know who was leading the armies. We know what time it started, and we know who won. But we don't know where it was.
I've always thought about that because it's like Chinese sources. I know where like a lot of them like it's the same idea. Like there's source replication, and also due to what China is was they're
They
very
invented
fucking
the
meticulous about keeping things, and they
they
invented paper.
administrated invented the administrative state like a
Yeah,
thousand years earlier than the rest of the planet did.
yeah.
Al-
Like they've been writing shit down.
I mean,
Um,
there's an argument as to whether was it Diocletian? Yeah, Diocletian's reforms turned Rome into an administrative state uh, proper, but
I think in like a very loose term, administrative states have been around for quite a long time. I mean,
yeah, but like
even like the Middle Kingdom of Egypt would have been like that's an administrative state. Like they did exist as an administrative state.
but China was like the Qin Shi Huang and then later the Han dynasty are much more recognizable and legible to us as states than the Persian Empire was
Oh yeah,
because
The Persian Empire and the Macedonia. I wanted to talk about this a second ago, right before we got into like how Alexander like conquered, essentially most of the cosmopolitan world. Um, Shares a lot of similarities with his northern neighbors, like the steppe peoples,
mm,
like just in the shape of his conquest, like why, like how he did things, why he did things. He didn't have the horses for the most part, but like that, I don't know how to explain it.
well, I mean,
It's
I
that kind
think
of
it's like the Mongol Empire, right? Because
mhm.
Alexander didn't build a state when he conquered like. There's a quote I don't remember where it was from, but like the Alexandrian administration of the Persian Empire never continued past the point of military occupation. That's part of why it just splintered so quickly after he
Yeah,
died,
that's why it just
is
fell
because
apart. There was no creation of authority. It was more
th-
so we're leaving
th-
troops here.
yeah, there was garrisons that and like some co-optation of like Persian bureaucratic structures, which like or the Achaemenid bureaucratic structures, I should say, because
It's a Persian Empire.
it's an Iranian empire. I
But
prefer
yeah,
the terminology is extremely fuzzy. They didn't even call themselves an Achaemenid Empire or a Persian Empire. They just called themselves Shasha, which just meant or Kasha, which just meant the empire.
yeah. Do we actually know what they called themselves?
Kasha.
Like other than no, but like what they called themselves, like as a people.
Uh, well, there wasn't really one homogenous people across the empire. There was the great king, the Shahan Shah, right?
Yeah, but the
who
ruling
was
elite, I would assume, they're all from one ethnic
I
identity.
think they were
They were Persians.
per.
Hey, they were Persians.
I think they might have been Elamite.
Could be.
Da, da, da.
I don't think they originated from Elam, did they? I thought they were like a
they were
northern...
from okay. They might have actually called themselves Persians because they were from Persis.
Yeah, because yeah, Persia's fun and strange. It's kind of like how like Iraq as an identity is not a thing. Like
That's
they're
always a very
Mesopotamians, like that's a whole deal.
it's a very complicated. National identity is very complicated, it turns out, and things aren't always one to one. Okay, this is real. Okay, this is fake. Right? Like,
Yeah. But that's
like
my point. Like they're very akin to the steppe empires. Like in the way
yes,
that they don't build an administrative state. They're an extractive military occupation.
yeah, and you don't really see administrative states show up until the after the Diadochi Wars cool down.
Yeah.
Because well, Ptolemy starts building one the second he arrives in Egypt, but yeah, that's part of why he was.
Ptolemy also had like the existing like Egypt has been a large state for 2,000 years at this point.
And it's also the richest part of the empire.
Yeah, I mean I think the only other thing that can kind of come close is God, I can't remember the name, the Central Asian portion of the empire, like the
Oxus River,
north of Iran. Yeah, the Oxus, like that was a Greek kingdom for Bactria.
Bactria, yeah, that
was a Greek kingdom for quite some time after Alexander died.
Yeah, yeah. The areas that are called that at this point are called the upper satrapies because east is up on all the maps at this point. That's where Orient comes from, because the sun rises in the east. So well, let's point our maps that way. Yeah. So, and I think it's important to note when we talk about the Achaemenid Empire as having a bureaucracy. What that really meant is that instead of having one guy overseeing all these like sub states and like petty like tribal chieftains and like city states and stuff and like kings is who are all ruling on a totally personal level. Instead of that, you have that one guy delegates to another guy in that region, and that guy delegates to two guys in that region. One in charge of the mill. Yeah, it's. I think the Achaemenid Empire, at least at towards its end, is best thought of not, at least after Cyrus and Darius, is best thought of not necessarily as a single cohesive state, but this weird like federation of kingdoms that owes fealty to one central throne.
Darius, the most maligned man in history.
Indeed. I'm so mad about 300. That movie is so fucking racist.
Well, that's Xerxes, a different guy.
No, that's Xerxes.
Who, for as far as we know, I'm pretty sure it is a historical fact that Xerxes was a bit of a freak.
I mean, like this. We're talking about an empire the size that was a 3-hour plane flight from end to end, was just sucking all that wealth to the throne. Of course, they're all going to be a bunch of debauched freaks.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah. God, can you imagine? Like, you're the only person for 1,000 miles who has had a regular BM.
Yeah, you're a god king.
You eat fiber.
You drink non-piston water.
Yeah, you drink non-piston wine.
You get to drink water.
Yeah.
But okay, so We are at like what, an hour
We
and
are at about an hour 10 on my end, so
okay. So where do you want to go from here? This is the most on track episode we've ever done.
yeah, for real, right? Like we've mostly stayed on track. I mean,
It's
the thing is,
because I've gotten all my ideological banter out by yelling at everybody in the other podcast Discord.
yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
I'm
we
right,
can't
by
really
the
do
way.
a Thunderdome out because we're both kind of Thunderdomed out.
I think we could like.
We could do a
I
Thunderdome
want to try and
centered.
say it.
Folks, hey, listen up for a second. We're going to wrap this episode up right here. All right? But don't let's worry, we're still not done yet. We are splitting this into a part two. Okay? So hang tight. We shall be heading back to ancient Greece real soon. But right now, we got to have a conversation. We're going to talk about the American left, about class consciousness, about the working folks out there, the American proletariat, and how we start building a real workers' party right here in the USA.